Witches Sabbath gathering. A dense, writhing mass of shadowy figures encircles a central horned presence, their bodies pressed together in an atmosphere thick with anxiety and anticipation. This is Francisco Goya's The Witches Sabbath, a painting that plunges viewers into the heart of a nocturnal congregation drawn from the fevered imagination of 18th century Spain. The composition is crowded, almost claustrophobic, with witches, some stooped, others hunched or crouched, gathered as if summoned by dark necessity. Goya's brushwork is brisk and expressive, eschewing clarity for a sense of movement and unease. The figures' features dissolve into grotesque caricatures, their eyes wide and mouths twisted, while the surrounding gloom presses in with oppressive force. The palette is dominated by ashen browns, shadowy grays, and muted ochres. Light exists only to define fear-stricken faces or the gleam of a hand raised in supplication. The effect is one of suffocating dread, a visual evocation of the superstitions and collective anxieties that gripped Spanish society. By immersing the viewer in this feverish scene, Goya transforms folklore into a psychological landscape, a cautionary tableau of what happens when reason succumbs to paranoia and myth. The horned figure's menacing presence amidst the swirling assembly, a single figure commands absolute authority. The horned one, shrouded in voluminous dark robes, seated or squatting with a posture at once regal and sinister. This figure's identity is ambiguous: devil, high priest of the occult, or the embodiment of evil. But its menace is unmistakable. Goya deliberately obscures the face, rendering it a void within the shadows, so the horns and silhouette become the focal points. The horns, sharp and assertive, frame the figure's head as an icon of fear, their curve echoed in the hunched backs of the witches who flank it. Around this dark nucleus, the crowd orbits, their attention drawn as if by magnetic force. The figure's posture is both dominating and predatory, a visual anchor amidst the chaos. The stark contrast between the blackness of the robes and the pallor of the surrounding faces further amplifies the figure's preternatural authority. In this way, Goya transforms the devil from mere antagonist of folklore into a psychological archetype, the specter of evil that lurks not only in myth, but in the dark corners of the human collective. Expressions of fear and fascination. Moving across the painting, the viewer encounters a multitude of faces illuminated in patches among the gloom. Each visage is a study in heightened emotion, eyes bulging with terror, brows furrowed in suspicion, mouths agape in awe or horror. Some witches seem enthralled, their gazes fixed on the horned leader with rapt devotion or desperate hope. Others shrink back, their bodies recoiling, their expressions tinged with doubt and dread. Goya's deft brushwork exaggerates features, elongates noses, and sharpens cheekbones, creating a sense of the grotesque that blurs the line between caricature and reality. The faces are not individualized portraits, but psychological masks, revealing the spectrum of responses to power, fear, and the unknown. This clustering of emotional extremes immerses the viewer in the collective mindset of the crowd, at once complicit and terrified, drawn together by the dark gravity of shared superstition. Goya captures the ways in which fear and fascination can coexist, feeding off one another in moments of mass hysteria, and in doing so, offers not only a reflection of his era, but a timeless exploration of the human psyche. The cloaked figure in white. In stark contrast to the shadowy throng, a lone figure dressed in white sits in the foreground, back turned to the viewer, positioned directly before the horned presence. The white of the garment is startling amidst the sea of darkness, immediately drawing the eye and inviting speculation. Is this figure an innocent captive, a novice initiate, or a willing participant in the ritual? The ambiguity of posture, slightly hunched, head bowed in either submission or contemplation, adds to the sense of enigma. This figure acts as a bridge between viewer and scene, a surrogate whose identity remains unresolved. The whiteness of the garment could symbolize purity or vulnerability, a stark reminder of the human cost of collective paranoia and scapegoating. At the same time, the placement of this figure so close to the embodiment of evil suggests the seductive power of such gatherings, the ease with which innocence can be drawn into darkness. Goya's compositional choice heightens the narrative tension, underscoring the perpetual struggle between knowledge and ignorance, light and shadow, individual and collective will. The overall organization of the painting is intentionally jumbled, the figures overlapping and interlocking in a tangle of limbs and drapery. Goya's brushwork is loose, almost reckless, imbuing the scene with restless energy. The contours of bodies dissolve into one another, heads and hands emerging abruptly from the murk as if conjured by nightmare logic. There is little sense of stable ground. The background is an indeterminate wash of darkness, into which the edges of the figures dissolve. This deliberate lack of clarity intensifies the sensation of movement and disorder. The very act of painting in Goya's hands becomes a metaphor for disintegration, of social order, of rational discourse, of the barriers between reality and hallucination. The rapid, gestural application of paint mirrors the instability of the era, with its flares of violence and uncertainty. Goya's disregard for classical finish is not a technical failing, but a radical choice, one that privileges psychological truth over optical realism. The result is a vision both immediate and timeless, a visual record of a world in the throes of dissolution. Symbolism of darkness and light. Throughout the composition, Goya orchestrates dramatic contrasts of light and darkness, deploying chiaroscuro to maximum psychological effect. Faces and hands emerge from blackness like apparitions, their pale flesh a fleeting presence in a world otherwise surrendered to shadow. The horned figure itself is nearly swallowed by darkness, its power paradoxically revealed only by the faint gleam of moonlight or firelight that catches a horn, a fold of cloth, a glinting eye. This interplay of illumination and obscurity is not merely decorative, it is deeply symbolic. Light in Goya's universe is ambiguous, a tool for both revelation and terror. The selective highlighting draws attention to the most expressive elements, forcing the viewer to confront the raw emotions on display. At the same time, the pervasive darkness is a metaphor for ignorance, repression, and the unseen forces that shape human behavior. The resulting visual drama is an allegory for the battle between enlightenment and superstition, reason and fear, civilization and its own darker impulses. Historical context of fear and repression. The Witches' Sabbath was conceived at a time when Spain trembled under the weight of political upheaval and social strife. The specter of the Inquisition, with its machinery of surveillance and punishment, loomed large in the popular imagination. Superstitions about witchcraft were not merely relics of medieval belief, but were actively weaponized to enforce conformity and suppress dissent. Goya's painting is thus both a document of its time and a coded critique of contemporary society. The frenzied gathering of witches becomes a metaphor for a nation gripped by collective paranoia, where the line between victim and persecutor is erased by fear. The cannibalistic despair that suffuses the scene, its sense of society consuming itself, is a powerful indictment of political decay and the human cost of repression. By framing these themes within the language of folklore and the grotesque, Goya evades censorship while speaking truth to power, offering a vision as politically astute as it is psychologically profound. Legacy and influence of Goya's vision. The haunting power of The Witches' Sabbath has echoed through generations, its imagery and themes resonating far beyond the confines of its historical moment. Goya's willingness to confront darkness, both literal and metaphorical, paved the way for later explorations of the irrational in art. The painting's expressive brushwork and psychological intensity prefigure the Romantic movement and anticipate the advent of modernism, where inner turmoil would become a central subject. Artists from Delacroix to the Surrealists found inspiration in Goya's unflinching examination of the human condition. The painting's warnings against mass hysteria, political repression, and the seductions of fear remain urgent and relevant. As viewers, we are compelled to confront our own complicity in structures of ignorance and power. To recognize in Goya's witches not only the superstitions of the past, but the anxieties of the present. The Witches' Sabbath thus endures as both a masterwork of artistic craft and a profound meditation on the fragility of reason and the ever-present threat of darkness within the human soul.